Yes, well, this idea of representation interests me. You see, if you're a member of Parliament or Congressman, you have your district or constituency, as we call it, and it's the only job in the world where you have one employee, and in the case of Parliament, 60,000 employers if you're a congressman, 240,000 employers, and you are responsible to them, you represent them. And what has happened recently, and I think it's something worth thinking about, the task of representation is to change the system to meet the needs of the people. But with the power of global capital now, instead of being represented, people are being managed. People are being changed to fit them into the system, instead of the system being changed to meet people's needs. And that's a huge transformation. I mean, the world is now run not by the American president or the British Prime Minister, the International Monetary Fund, the World Trade Organization, the multinational corporations have a far greater power than political leaders. And people sense this. And they become cynical and so on, and turnout in voting is low. But actually, this is an attempt to reverse the power of the vote. If the power is taken away from you and handed over to corporations or international organizations that are not elected, then you realize that you've lost something of fundamental importance. And I've participated in more elections than I can think of, and when I go into we call it a polling station, you call it a voting station, how do you call it? And an old lady comes in on crutches, and with a pencil she puts a cross on a bit of paper and puts it in a box, and with that cross she can destroy a government without killing anyone. Now it may sound negative, but by God, I've never forgotten when the votes at the end of apartheid occurred. I was outside the South African embassy, and we had a little television set, and I saw people queuing up to vote, miles queuing, because they had the right to destroy governments and elect their own. I think democracy is a very, very radical idea. It's not accepted by communists, and Stalin didn't accept it. I don't think capitalists like it because it takes power from them and gives it to people who haven't got money. And that is a very dangerous idea indeed.
I've never understood why we allow, for instance, a private insurance company, because they have to turn this profit, and they have a responsibility to their shareholders to do that.
Yeah.
And the best way to maximize profit is to insure only the healthy.
Yes, well, that's true.
Not insure the unhealthy.
Yeah.
It seems like a bit of a racket. And if you came from outer space and looked at this, you'd go, wait a minute.
Well, you see, the interesting thing is, in the armed forces and in the American armed forces as well, you have socialized medicine. If a soldier is injured, then he's looked after. Of course, you want to get him back to war if you can, but you see, the army is a model in a way. Every armed force in the world, they train you to fly a plane or fire a gun, as I was, and they look after you if you're ill. And so, if you accept socialized medicine at the heart of the Pentagon thinking, why not for everybody else? I mean, I think if you put these arguments, they're common sense arguments, really. Because a healthy nation is in the interest of all of us. Just as an educated nation is in the interest of all of us. When I go to my doctor, I benefit by her education. When I get in a bus, I benefit by the training of the bus driver. And if I go in the street and I find a lot of ill people, that might affect me. So I think there is a common interest in this. You see, once you start the privatization argument, it's very, very interesting. In the old days, before we had a fire service, individuals insured their own homes against fire. And if you insured, you put a plaque on the wall, so if there was a fire, the fire brigade would come along and only put out a fire if you were insured. Well, of course, it didn't help because the house next door might catch fire. And why not privatize the police and the army? Why can't competition apply to everything? And the answer is people wouldn't have it. But why do they accept the fact that health is still on the basis of cash and not need?
It's crazy, isn't it?
It is a crazy system.
We don't like working and somebody else not working. And I don't want to pay for that person who's not working. Or, I'm healthy, why should I pay for somebody who's unhealthy?
Well, that's an individualist view of the world. But on the other hand, the guy who isn't working, if he had a job, might be your customer, if you want to turn it into economic terms. Maybe. The word customer is a very interesting word. It comes into all the language now. And I was on a train the other day, and the ticket collector said, customers who boarded the train look after their tickets. And I said, I'm not a customer, I'm a passenger. Oh no, he said, he looked in a book, you're a customer. So I said, well, if I go to health for my operation, to a hospital for operation, am I a patient or a customer? Well, the book didn't advise him on that. But the thing about a customer is, if you haven't any money, you can't be a customer. So the word customer dehumanizes the poor. The people who need homes most are the homeless people in the streets. But they're not customers because they can't afford a house. So economic language classifies us according to our money and not our need. And I just think that leads to unhappiness, revolutions, conflict, struggle. Why? Why don't we just recognize, as we do in our own family, we wouldn't allow a child to starve because they were inadequate. You'd look after them. You wouldn't allow a parent to starve. You'd look after them. And I think this is where the
Because that's your family, though. But why was anybody else's family my responsibility?
Yeah, but then the question is, are we not all one family? And anyway, what Jesus said, I mean, this is why I do think Jesus can be properly interpreted as one of the major founders of the socialist idea that we are all one family. And indeed we are too, because, you know, if your neighbour's got some serious disease, you pick it up. If your neighbour's house catches fire, your house catches fire. So I think these ideas are very simple to explain.
Do you think it's safe to say that perhaps Jesus was the first socialist?
Well, that point has often been made, and somebody said that does not mean he was a Labour MP for Galilee North, and I agree with that. But you see, my mother was a Bible scholar, and every day we read the Bible, and she taught me something that's made a huge influence on my life. She said, the Bible is the story of the kings who had power and the prophets who preach righteousness. And she taught me to support the prophets and not the kings. It's got me into a lot of trouble in my life, but it makes an awful lot of sense today. Because Jesus did, he preached justice. And I think justice, which is a moral question, is much more important than profitability or strength or weakness. And, of course, the most powerful religion in the world today, as you know, is not Judaism, Christianity or Islam. It's the people who worship money.